Welcome everyone to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm David Moeller, our secretary filling here. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. Read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostron.org/MPO_NON_DISCRIMINATION. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Ibu Qureshi of the MPO staff at iquraisi@ctps.org or 857-702-3695 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Others remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. Please raise your hand via Zoom if you would like to use an AI note taker during this meeting. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Please call the roll.
Mass. Seat 1.
This is David Moeller.
Mass. Seat 2. Mass. Highway Division. MBTA. Oh. Let's see. Just searching for John. MBTA.
Good morning, Sandy Johnson here representing the MBTA.
Morning, Sandy. Regional Transportation Authorities, Metro West Transit Authority.
Good morning, Tyler Tarasi representing Administrator Jim Nee for the MWRTA. Present.
Morning, Tyler. Massport emailed ahead. MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Good morning, Eric. MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, Hannah Swolikowski, MBTA Advisory Board.
Welcome, Hannah. Advisory Council.
It's Carl Alexander, representing the Advisory Council.
Welcome, Carl. Next is the City of Boston, Seat 1.
Morning, Jen Rowe representing Mayor Michelle Wu in the City of Boston.
Morning, Jen. City of Boston, Seat 2.
Hi, good morning. Patrick Hoey, representing Mayor Michelle Wu in the City of Boston.
Hello, Patrick. Next, at-large city, City of Everett.
Jay Monty, representing City of Everett, and Mayor Robert Van Campen.
Thank you. Coming in a little bit soft there, but welcome, Jay. At-large city, City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozas, representing Mayor Mark Laredo and the City of Newton.
Good morning, David. At-large town of Arlington.
Good morning, Leonard Diggins, representing Select Board Chair Diane Mahan.
Morning, Len. At-large town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute, representing Select Board Chairman Bernard Cregan for the town of Brookline.
Welcome, Erin. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, and representing Mayor Jake Wilson.
Good morning, Tom. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Lexington.
Megan Roach, representing Select Board Chair Jill Hay for the Magic Subregion.
Welcome, Megan. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giambetti, representing Metro West Region, and Mayor Charles Skifrin.
Dennis. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly. Do not see Darlene. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington. Also do not see John. South Shore Coalition Town of Hull.
Chris Diorio representing Hull Select Board Chair Erwin Nessov.
Morning, Chris. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Rachel Benson, representing SWAP, and Chairman Gallo.
Welcome, Rachel. And we have finally the Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing Select Board Chair Amanda Grow in the Trick Subregion.
Good morning. That calls the roll, Mr. Pardon me. Let me just check for.
Darlene just got here. Sorry, Beverly.
Hi, Darlene. Welcome. Thank you. Do we have anyone from the Federal Highway Administration present? With that, is there anyone else I have not yet called that I should return back to?
Did you see John Romano here?
John Romano is present. Hello, John.
I did.
Thank you, recorded John. Is there anyone else? That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I don't have one, so we'll go directly into the executive director's report. Tegan?
Thank you, David. And hi, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Tegan Tyke. I'm the executive director of the staff to the Boston Region MPO. So I'd like to set the stage for today, give you some updates. If you can go to the next slide. So I'd like to start with some takeaways from 2 recent events, and then I'll share a staffing update and engagement update and set the context for today's agenda. Next slide, please. So in terms of recent events, for the first time in January, I attended the Massachusetts Municipal Association's annual conference called Connect 351. I know quite a number of you also participate in that conference, and I just wanted to share that I thought it was a really great experience to connect not only with board members, but also various staff and elected officials from a number of other municipalities in our region, many of whom were not very familiar at all with the MPO as a resource, either from the planning perspective or as a funding source. So I thought it actually ended up being a great engagement opportunity to talk about the types of decisions and investments that this board makes at that forum. And it was a really good place as well to talk about some of our regional planning work. In particular, the Vision Zero Action Plan was a very strong framework to talk about because it enables municipalities to apply for additional SS4A funding to implement safety measures. So thank you to those of you who I did see there and I got to chat with, and I'll look forward to seeing some folks next year as well. Last Friday was also the annual Mass DOT MARPA meeting. MARPA is the Massachusetts Association of Regional Planning Agencies. And that's an annual meeting when we find out about funding levels for the MPOs in the state in the future federal fiscal years. It's called a MARPA meeting at the RPA level because most of the other MPOs in the state are embedded within their RPA, which is just not the case in Boston. So both MAPC and I attend that event to understand what the funding levels are going to be. And Ethan Lapointe and Olivia Sakosha will update you later on those funding levels, both for the TIP and also for our planning work. And we'll discuss those as well at the A and F committee that will be held next Thursday. But for those of you who aren't familiar, those annual meetings are also a really great place to talk about, to kind of coordinate with all the regional planning agencies and talk about some of the shared questions and topics between Mass DOT and the MPOs across the state. And we usually have federal participation as well. So at this particular Mass.MARPA meeting, we had some robust conversations about deobligated PL funding, funding sources in general, August redistribution, when our state can access more funding towards construction at the end of a federal fiscal year. And we heard from Michael Trepanier from MassDOT, who was also on the MPO's annual meeting panel, about their program management office and updates on how they're prioritizing and reprioritizing MassDOT's universe of projects. So if you're interested at all, please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to find out more about what happened at that meeting. But it was a great and productive conversation. So next slide, please. So as is often the case, I have a bittersweet staffing update. So I would like to share with you all that David Knudsen, who's a chief data analyst with more than 24 years of service at the MPO, will be retiring as of March 1st. And just to share a little about him, if you don't know him as much, David actually joined us back in November 2001 as an intern working on GIS, and he helped lay the groundwork for what we know today at the MPO as the data management team. Over those 24 years, he's been a cornerstone of our geospatial data management efforts. He's worked extensively with both MPO and MassDOT data, and he's really been a lead thinker in the development and maintenance of MassDOT's road inventory. He's been a key contributor to our data program launch, and he's also been a really trusted advisor for staff and stakeholders across many of our programs and projects. David has also been a strong advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility at the agency and has contributed to making advancements in that space in many ways. And he's also generously stepped in to manage teams on an interim basis, including his most recent term as the acting manager of the data management team. So his knowledge, his thoughtfulness, his very inquisitive nature, and his willingness to step in whenever he's needed is something that we all very much miss and will have a lasting impact on the MPO. We'd like to give David Knudsen a very quick chance to say just a few words, so we're able to connect. Are you able to unmute, David?
Yes, I am. Thanks very much for those kind words, Tegan, and thank you to the MPO board for the chance to say a few words. They really are very few. Principally, I'd like to express my gratitude for the opportunity not only to work for the public good, but also to work for such a humane employer. I came to the MPO as a career changer in 2001 with little in the way of obviously applicable credentials, a thesis on Geoffrey Chaucer, for example. I loved maps and geographic data and transportation, so I at least felt confident the MPO had done the right thing in hiring me. Over the years, I've worked very much in the background as support to other planners and analysts in the office, helping them to do their work in the most efficient and robust way we could manage. I won't embarrass myself by revealing how few board meetings I have attended. However, I have had the pleasure of contributing to a close technical relationship with the DOT through my work on the road inventory, as Tegan mentioned, and on a traffic count database that was actually the seed for the DOT's current database. I think both organizations are the better for this kind of collaboration. I've seen significant change in the staff and operations of the MPO over the years, but I've always felt proud of our constant focus on using the best science in the public interest, as well as our adaptability in the face of change. These things are as important now as they have ever been. I hope the MPO will keep on carrying on, and I look forward to seeing what happens next. And I will say again, thank you.
Very well said, David. I'm sure you'll always be welcome to come back and join more MPO meetings as a member of the public after you retire, so feel free. So thank you. And you'll see some folks are writing notes to you in the chat, so make sure you take a look at those. We'll miss you. Okay, so moving on through this report, I have just a very brief engagement update. For the past few years, we've been giving updates to the board on engagement on a roughly quarterly basis, but over the last couple of months, the first quarter of federal fiscal year 2026, there's not a lot of new data to report on, just there's been a reduced volume of engagement activity around the holidays. So we'll present the next update in the spring, but in the meantime, we are adding the data that was collected to the public engagement dashboard and really encourage you to take a look at that dashboard and explore the things that we're hearing from our stakeholders. So I think a link will be in the chat, so you can take a look for it there. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I didn't go on. Next slide. There we go. All right, so for today's agenda, first we have a few action items other than the usual minutes, if we have those today. Yep, we do. So the first action item after that will be, you'll hear from Scott Puder about a discrete study work scope to identify pedestrian scale lighting procurement and implementation strategies for cities and towns throughout the region. The study is also meant to help communities better understand MassDOT's pedestrian scale guidance and how it can be applied at intersections and other locations. So I'll ask you to approve that scope so work can get underway for this federal fiscal year. And then we will have another action item. We'll hear from Priyanka Chapekar on the regional and state roadway safety performance for the federally required PM1 roadway safety measure. So you're asked to vote and adopt these each year, and it's typically adopted to be consistent with the MassDOT proposed targets, which are essentially projecting current trends into the future to develop realistic short-term targets. But then the next item will have a back-to-back discussion about the MPO's long-term target of 0 fatalities and injuries, with the MPO's Vision Zero action plan being the guiding framework of how we're going to get there. So Ali Clayman will present about a longer-term approach to tracking progress towards our Vision Zero goal. And she'll give us an update on the timeline for the adoption of the final action plan, including some conversation about the Vision Zero resolution that we will be posting that this board will be asked to sign as part of endorsing the final action plan. And then she'll also update you on the implementation work that we are doing now and our upcoming partnerships with municipalities and organizations on design, youth engagement, capacity building in communities, and opportunities for how you as board members can get involved. Then, as I mentioned earlier, Ethan and Olivia will be presenting to this board on the planning and capital funding levels that will be available to this board in FFY 27 and beyond. And then lastly, Betsy Harvey Hertzfeld, will discuss the results of the an analysis that shows whether the likely impacts of projects funded in the last two TIPs have mitigated the disparate impacts and disproportionate burdens. I'm talking too fast, I apologize. Identified in the Destination 2050, our last long-range plan. Next slide. And then our next meeting, we'll likely have a few more action items, but the bulk of the meeting will likely be spent on quarterly readiness updates from the TIP readiness days. And note that'll be on February 19th and it will be virtual. I will not see you there. I will be on vacation, but I will see you the following meeting. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Tegan. So the MPO's president at the MMA Connect 351 seemed pretty beneficial. So what kind of presence did the MPO have there? I mean, you said you went.
This year, just I attended. So we'll think about that in the future. I think so, but this year was just me.
Okay, because you anticipated my next question. I think it would be good, if we could do more of that in the future. I take it that the MARPA did not have a presence there because that seems like the umbrella organization under which we actually, I guess that's more MAPC, or would it also include us?
MARPA is really the RPA executive director. So
Yeah, okay.
I attend and participate in MARPA because of our more unique split.
Right.
Since I'm executive director and the executive director of MEPC is usually at that table, but I'm not a director that's part of the MARPA voting block.
Right.
And I guess I can't say, I don't recall seeing MARPA at the Connect 351 conference, but I can't speak for them because I could have missed it. It's a pretty large space, but I did see quite a few other RPA executive directors and MPO transportation directors at the meeting. Or at the conference. Okay. They were around.
Yeah, great. But there's no real umbrella organization for the MPOs, though, right? The state level?
It's a mix at the state level. It's a mix of MARPA and then the transportation directors that typically report to the RPA executive directors. And
right.
I are also part of what's called the Transportation Managers Group.
Okay,
so there's two forums, sort of, and MARPA only sometimes covers transportation versus TMG is always talking about transportation.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also just want to say it was really great to see you at the conference. I was there in dual capacity with the advisory board, but also I'm the vice chair of the select board in Sharon. So I think your presence there, a lot of people, especially out here that are technically part of the MPO, including my own town, don't really necessarily know when you mention I serve on the MPO. And even as Brian and I have been going to cities and towns, meeting with our members, 9 times out of 10, we bring up the fact that we sit on the MPO, and also if cities or towns, need support or anything, to reach out as well, and sort of that duality of connecting. And so I would definitely encourage you this year. Brian and Isabella also decided, instead of us tabling at the MMA because they have the giant vendor conference, the trade show, to attend as attendees. It was more beneficial in terms of walking around. And I think also, like, cost-wise, being a vendor there is kind of expensive. So I definitely would encourage you even to expand the MPO presence. And also just connecting with MMA as much as possible in terms of just bridging all the different resources that are available and that are part of cities and towns. So perhaps that's something even with the advisory board, the MPO, we can all just sort of interconnect, because I think a lot of cities and towns, especially now when we sort of focus on different local issues, it's 90% it's the planning staff and the engineering, but then when it comes to like the elected offices, a lot of people don't necessarily know the technicalities or what the organizations do.
Thanks for that input, Hannah. That's really useful perspective.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tegan? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is public comments. Are there any at this time? Seeing none, if you have a comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next item is committee chairs reports. Are there any?
Everyone, Carl Alexander, Vice Chair here. The next Community Advisory Council meeting is this coming Monday, February 9th. We'll be discussing options for the FFY 27 discrete studies. And just a reminder, if you're interested in joining, council meetings are open to the public, and you can find more information on the MPO's website. That is all. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions for Carl? Seeing none, Jen Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee met on January 22nd. Ethan shared a summary of trends that are emerging this TIP cycle following sub-regional readiness days. Those include fewer projects with cost increases, thankfully, but some substantial increases to a couple of projects. Additionally, 2/3 of projects are requiring delays based on our recently adopted readiness guidelines, with an average delay of 2 years. As a result, we should expect the next meeting to see a readiness scenario with large surpluses in the near-term years and low funding or deficits in the outer years. The good news is that the readiness policy has allowed MPO staff to ask the T, CADA, MWRTA, and MassDOT for candidates for fill-in projects early and at the correct scale. The bad news is that given the low funding availability in the outer years, and also a likelihood that several of the projects that are no longer advancing move off the TIP, the next TIP will probably fund fewer municipal proponent projects. Meanwhile, we do still have a large number of applicant construction projects that are advancing in design, many of which have already submitted 25%. And that indicates that these projects could be more than ready for programming in 2031 under the readiness guidelines. Finally, Ethan reported that we're seeing fewer applications actually for the Community Connections Bike Share and Design Funding projects, all of which require local matches and may reflect increasingly constrained municipal budgets. In discussion, committee members inquired when we'd received more information about the fill-in projects and some of the drivers of cost increases. They also reflected a bit on the sub-regional readiness days. They were appreciative that proponents didn't pitch their projects and were quite frank in describing current statuses. At the same time, it was noted that in future iterations, we could encourage proponents to bring additional technical expertise to allow for a deeper exploration of some of the drivers of cost and readiness and associated risks. Finally, at the end of the meeting, Adriana presented the TIP project dashboard that will replace the bulk of TIP Chapter 3. Members provided some initial feedback, with several noting that they were already finding it as a very helpful reference during the conversations. So that's what I have to report. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions for Jen? See none. Sam Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to quickly note that last week, the Unified Planning Work Program Committee met on January 29th. We had a fairly thorough discussion of 5 discrete study proposals that will be considered for programming in federal fiscal year 27. There were some novel studies and also some that were either phase 2s or phase 3s of previously funded studies. The next meeting will be Thursday, February 26th at 1 p.m. to hopefully move these along further. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Sam? Seeing none, we can skip item 6 because Carl already gave his report. So item 7 is the approval of the minutes of December 18th. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes, please? Please state your name for the record when making a motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, MAPC. I make a motion to approve the December 18th meeting minutes.
Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, I will second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Tyler Terrassi,
Tyler Terrassi, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swilikowski, yes.
Carl Alexander,
Carl Alexander, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Hoey, yes.
Jay Monty,
Hey, Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Dennis Giambetti, I'm going to call Dennis Giambetti for the approval of December 18th meeting minutes. I might have a tough time coming off of mute. I'll return. Next is Darlene Nguyen.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Diorio,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Just returning back to Dennis Giambetti.
Dennis Giambetti, yes. Sorry.
Not a problem. Thank you. And that motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the January 15th minutes. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, MAPC. I'll make a motion to approve the January 15th meeting minutes.
Tom Bent.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, please call the roll, Dave.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Tyler Terrassi,
Tyler Terrassi, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swilikowski, yes.
Carl Alexander,
Carl Alexander, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Hoey, abstain.
next Jay Monty,
Hey, Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Chris Diorio,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Anyone else who would like to be acknowledged? That motion carries. Over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a work scope for pedestrian scale lighting study. Scott Powder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. My name is Scott Pooter, and I'm a senior transportation planner with the Boston Region MPO. Today, I'll be presenting the work scope for the 2026 UPWP discrete study titled Pedestrian Scale Lighting Study. The study has a budget of $50,000 and will last for about 7 months after work commences. We know from initial research by other state department transportations that pedestrian scale lighting helps illuminate sidewalks and improve pedestrian safety, security, and comfort. Properly designed and installed pedestrian scale lighting can both help define a streetscape and create a sense of place in a community. Pedestrian scale lighting focuses on human scale visibility and not vehicular travel. Over a 7-year period, a total of 667 vulnerable road users, VRU, crashes, resulting in fatal or serious injuries occurred in the region while lighting was a potential factor. accounting for 40% of all VRU fatal or serious crashes. Street lighting plays a vital role in enhancing safety and reducing nighttime crashes, and providing resources for communities to make informed decisions around their lighting options is crucial for creating a safer and more secure environment for VRUs. The Boston MPO's original intent was to develop guidance for communities to select appropriate lighting specifications, including lighting intensity, LED options, and other lighting recommendations at various settings. However, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, MassDOT, is developing a pedestrian scale lighting guide to improve safety and comfort for vulnerable users at intersections, mid-block crossings, and roundabouts. This will serve as a technical resource for MassDOT, local municipalities, and other stakeholders, providing lighting specifications, warning guidelines, and visual aids to communicate technical guidance. The Boston MPO is partnering and coordinating with MassDOT's project team. The MPO will work with MassDOT to enable communities to better understand MassDOT's pedestrian scale guidance and how it is applied at intersections and other site-specific locations, while establishing a unified approach to updating pedestrian scale lighting within current municipal codes and future roadway projects. We will work closely with MassDOT's project schedule to ensure a succinct timeline and avoid duplicated efforts. MassDOT's preliminary work began in December and will continue through May, and the MPO attended the initial kickoff meeting and remains a part of the project team. What are our objectives? MassDOT will be developing the design guide. Our study, which will be completed in tandem, will have 4 objectives. The first objective, understand existing methodologies and processes by documenting pedestrian scale lighting implementation strategies through peer reviews and research for a regional approach to support MassDOT's rollout of the design guide. Second objective, the MPO will conduct a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats SWOT analysis of implementation strategies and identify best approaches within existing frameworks for implementing pedestrian scale lighting or integration into planning processes. Third objective, from MassDOT's prioritized crossing list, the MPO will select 3 to 5 intersection, mid-block crossing, and roundabout locations. Each location will be used to develop a case study that incorporates MassDOT's pedestrian scale lighting guide, recommendations, and countermeasures. The fourth objective, create a repeatable, implementable process for cities and towns within the Boston region. The products from this study will include best practices, document for implementation strategies through peer interviews and research, the SWOT analysis results and recommendation implementation processes, 3 to 5 case studies based on MassDOT's initial findings, and a white paper. We request your approval of this study and are happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Oh, there are questions.
Oh, wow.
Director Assa.
Yes, Scott, thank you for that overview. Is the guidance focused for cities and towns, or I'm just trying to think who is the target audience?
I'm sorry. Okay. You cut out a little bit there. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. My question is the target audience of the study like cities and towns?
Yes.
Like for local streets?
Yes. So I think it's on MassDOT roads, and then also I think it's an overview of like local streets as well. From what I understand, they're using the guidance and looking at different ways to implement this, these pedestrian scale lighting.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron, shoot.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Erin Chute with the town of Brookline. I just want to say how incredibly supportive we are of this study. It's something that we had brought up about a year ago in terms of kind of a missing link in a lot of our kind of more urban centers. And as we have the passage of the MBTA Communities Act, many of us are age-friendly communities, and we have these waves of residential and commercial areas that go to more residential and come back to residential and commercial, all connected by public transit. So I think this is a really important study. I'm glad to hear about the partnership with MassDOT, and I think that it will have a great amount of utility and interest from municipalities in terms of making our communities more accessible and safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Scott, again, like Erin just said, very supportive of this program. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. On with this study, will be bringing in like lighting professionals that actually design and lay out lighting programs? Would that be something that would happen?
So MassDOT is working with Michael Baker International, and they have a lot of experience kind of with layouts, color temperature, LED lighting. So they'll be the ones that are really like guiding and creating that guidance. Ours is like more so going into, okay, this is how it would be applied in our, our region. So they're the ones who are really like the technical experts. We're just pushing it forward and saying, hey, this could be, adopted in your town, and here are like their recommendations.
No, that's great. Yeah, because it's important to have lighting professionals make these decisions. The other question is kind of on Eric's question, because it looked like to this was be mainly intersections and rotaries. I think Eric was asking, does it get down into streets? Like regular streets, side streets, things like that. Because I do know, a lot of municipalities have switched over to LED lighting. And the question I've had with that is, did they really look at, how that lighting is distributed? Because with lighting, it's all about the distribution, color temperature, and photometrics. So I guess that's a question. Will it give recommendations for like side streets and main streets, or is it going to be mainly intersections and rotaries?
From what I understood from the scope of work that was developed, it is more so at those locations that I mentioned, but I can always follow up and make sure that that is, if that is included within the study as well.
I just think it'd be important if we had a standard, especially based on LED lighting, because it has different distribution setups, and I think one of the things I've noticed with some of the changes that have been made, it throws more light onto the street but less onto the sidewalks. So I think, I'm not sure when they were doing the energy efficiency, it was all about energy efficiency, and I don't know how much of it was really thought about on light distribution. So just a thought for the study. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're describing is the horizontal. Like, yes, it's like laid out more so on the street, but like we're trying with a lot of like lighting, you want to have that vertical so you actually see the pedestrian on the side of the road or, crossing the intersection. So I think that is something. So I took a look at the MassDOT previous design guidelines, and they have that information, but they don't necessarily say pedestrian scale lighting, but they do have that in there. It's really building upon that. So that's really what I think it comes down to.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you
go.
Steve Ballina.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so I was involved. I support this very much because I was involved in the UPWP selecting this. But it seems to be, pedestrian scale, it seems to be oriented only towards pedestrians. And like are you advocating here for separate lighting just for pedestrians? Because most of the towns, the lighting on the street is also lighting the sidewalks. And I thought this would be more of how to get the existing or the lights on the streets to also be adequate for pedestrians. This sounds like something separate. Is that the case?
I think it's building upon the current guidance, but I think I understand what you're saying. So yes, this is like building on. So taking a different look, right? This is looking at pedestrian scale. So pedestrian scale lighting can be, basically lower pole heights, looking at different color temperatures. It's really like thinking about at like an intersection roundabout, hey, how do we put these in so that way there is a little bit more? But I see what you're saying. So it's a little bit more like, hey, if you are to develop this, think about locations that really do need this kind of infrastructure. So that's the way I look at it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so I believe that particularly towns who don't know much about lighting don't always do a very good job of it. Because I know my town, it's like whoever says, "Hey, I need a light in front of my house," gets a light in front of the house, and people keep doing that, and you end up with very uneven lighting down the length of the street. Never mind, what effect it has on the pedestrians. So I thought I was hoping this would be more inclusive, saying in general how uh, to organize and install lighting so that so that you have a good so it's good for automobiles and for pedestrians, not just pedestrians alone.
I think it's just one piece of it, but I think what we're going to be doing is looking at what other regional agencies are doing as well. I think that's part of this process. So we could obviously like take a look at that, like how pedestrian scale lighting is like would be used at like a regional level. So maybe there's some overlap there as well.
I hope so because I just can't see individual towns with their lighting budgets uh, doing additional pedestrian lighting only. But I can just see where they organize the lighting on existing streets to be adequate for both automobiles and pedestrians. So that's why I would like the study to be more inclusive of that.
Thanks, Steve. Chris Diorio.
Thanks, Scott. I just want to just kind of add that, I know a lot of towns on the South Shore are concerned a lot with like light pollution and making sure like there's dark sky compliance and a lot of the new commercial buildings that come out. So I just want to make sure you guys keep that in mind, as you're going through the process. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Megan Roche.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. I want to say I'm really appreciative of this work scope. I think a lot of municipal planners do their planning during the daylight hours, and then we may go home to other communities so we don't experience, the fruits of our labors in our own communities at nighttime. So really appreciate this and look forward to seeing how it plays out.
Thank you, Megan. Please call the roll. I'm sorry. I need a motion in a second to approve this work scope as presented. My mistake. Eric?
Eric Barassa, MAPC. I'll make a motion to approve the work scope as presented.
Tom Ben.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Please call the roll now.
Certainly. David Moeller,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Tyler Terrassi,
Tyler Terrassi, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swilkowski, yes.
Carl Alexander,
Carl Alexander, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Hoey, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kostas, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Ben, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Chris Diorio,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, and that calls, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott, and apologies for mispronouncing your last name. Next item on the agenda is roadway safety performance targets. Priyanka Chapkar. I'm sorry, I mispronounced that one too. Priyanka Chapkar.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Good morning, everyone. My name is Priyanka Chapekar, and today I'll be presenting on adopting targets for roadway safety for the calendar year 2026 in the Boston region. Next slide, please. So the presentation will cover items including an overview of the performance-based planning program, which identifies these targets, an overview of roadway safety performance targets as set by the state, actions in progress to address roadway safety concerns, future target setting steps, and finally, a request to the board to adopt roadway safety performance targets for the calendar year 2026 for the Boston Region MPO. Next slide. The Federal Highway Administration has mandated three main types of performance measures called the PM3 measures to ensure a data-oriented approach in transportation planning. These cover safety, infrastructure condition, and system performance, and they have varying requirements of reporting. So the targets for infrastructure condition, which is bridge and pavement, and roadway system performance, which is travel time reliability and the congestion mitigation and air quality measures, have a timeline of 2 and 4 year targets, whereas the roadway safety or PM1 as it is called are required to be set annually along with transit safety and transit asset condition. Next slide. So this is what the target setting process looks like. The US Department of Transportation establishes national performance measures to assess roadway performance or conditions. States are then required to establish their statewide targets based on these FHWA set measures. And MPOs in the states are required to adopt regional targets within 180 days of setting state targets. And MPOs have the option of choosing either to support the statewide targets or setting their own regional targets. And the supporting the statewide targets is what we are hoping to have approved for this item. Next slide. So for the Boston Region MPO, the requested action today is to support adoption of the statewide roadway safety targets set by the Commonwealth for the calendar year 2026. Next slide. So this is an overview of roadway safety performance measures that are set. So FHWA has defined these 5 measures shown in the table for monitoring roadway safety performance. These include number of fatalities, rate of fatalities, calculated as fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled or VMT, the number of serious injuries, rate of serious injuries per 100 million VMT, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, which mainly focus on vulnerable road users. So these measures are calculated as 5-year rolling averages across multiple years. The method for setting statewide targets is similar to evaluating performance of these measures. So MassDOT sets targets using 5-year rolling average projections for each of the 5 measures. And MassDOT establishes these targets for the ongoing calendar year as well as interim targets for 2 years after the current year. And the final long-term target is 0 for all types of fatalities and serious injuries. Next slide. Based on that methodology, this year's target setting process for the state has 2022 through 26 projections for the ongoing calendar year, 2024 through 28 projections forecasting current trends further into the future as an interim projection or target, and 0 fatalities and injuries for all measures as the long-term targets. The 2026 calendar year projection for fatalities is 357, for rate of fatalities is 0.56, for serious injuries or number of serious injuries is 2,562, for rate of serious injuries is 4.04, and for non-motorized injuries and fatalities is 512, as projected and set by MassDOT. And further details on each of these measures will follow in upcoming slides. And it's important to note that the long-term target of 0 fatalities in this table also aligns with the MPO's Vision Zero goal, which MPO staff Ali Clayman will be presenting in the later part of today's meeting. Next slide. So the graphs, the charts on this and the next few slides will show roadway safety performance for each of the FHWA PM1 measure for the state, for the region, and also will show targets that are set by the state. So these have been calculated as 5-year rolling averages, as mentioned earlier. For roadway fatalities due to the impacts of the pandemic into 2021 and 22, fatalities were increasing compared to previous years. However, this trend began to reverse in 2023, as seen in the chart, before a slight increase again in 2024. And for the Boston region, fatalities have shown a downward trend until 2021, but have been slowly increasing in more recent years. Next slide. For the fatality rate, it is calculated as number of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. The fatality rate has fluctuated a lot since post-pandemic years, but recently has seen a decreasing trend for the state. Similar pattern is observed for the Boston region, although with lower rates than seen for the state. Next slide. For the number of serious injuries, again, due to lingering effects of the pandemic into 21 and 22, serious injuries increased as compared to previous years. However, Massachusetts began to see this trend reverse in 2023 and 2024, but not as low as pre-COVID trends yet. Serious injuries in the Boston region had dropped in the pandemic years in 2020 and 21, but increased steeply in 23 and dropped again in 2024. But a rising trend appears again for 2025. Next slide. Similar to the fatality rate, the rate of serious injuries is trending toward pre-pandemic levels again. For the region, 5-year average serious injury rates dropped during the pandemic, but have neared pre-pandemic levels again in 2023. Next slide. The number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries has fluctuated a lot in recent years, but has seen an increasing trend overall. Non-motorized serious injuries and fatalities in the Boston region had dropped during the pandemic, but have shown an increase and remained nearly constant since 2023, with a slight downward trend. Next slide. These are a few key takeaways from analysis of roadway safety performance, which was presented in the previous slides. So MassDOT and the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security have proposed calendar year 2026 roadway safety targets that generally aim for modest decreases, taking into account trends that are resulting from lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. This calendar year targets for 2022 through 26 to aim for fewer negative outcomes or more decreased trends than the 2021 through 2025 targets for most of the measures. As there was, next slide. As there was an uptick in vulnerable road users or the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries for 2021, 22, 23, and 24, the 2026 projections for this measure are set slightly higher than the previous year to take into account actual performance and trends. Next slide. Targets for all of the measures get more aggressive or ambitious for the 2024 through 28 period, as projections show fewer fatalities and serious injuries, considering ongoing actions to address safety. Next slide. In the past few years, the Boston region has more or less followed similar trends or trajectories as those of the Commonwealth. However, it does show lower rates of fatalities and serious injuries than the state. Next slide. These are some of the actions underway to address roadway safety concerns and performance. So Massachusetts, the first was implementation of the Massachusetts Next Strategic Highway Safety Plan. MassDOT also conducted a vulnerable road user safety assessment. On the MPO side, the MPO has developed a draft Vision Zero action plan and dashboard. And the Boston Region MPO and multiple municipalities in the region also received Safe Streets for All grants to implement safety projects and demonstrations. Next slide. So the next steps for the roadway safety targets presented today are a vote to adopt MassDOT safety targets and work towards achieving those goals within the region. And as the Vision Zero action plan progresses and is implemented, MPO staff can return to the board to discuss and develop more regionally meaningful measures and interim targets. And next slide, please. So the requested action from the board today is a vote to approve and adopt MassDOT's calendar year 2026 roadway safety targets as presented. These targets will then be incorporated for reporting in relevant MPO planning documents. And thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Priyanka. Questions? Lynn Diggins.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And thanks for the presentation. We noting the decline in the rate of serious injuries from 4.08 to 3.38. That's a pretty big change. And I noticed that the number of serious injuries are down a lot, but I couldn't get a handle on the denominator. I looked in the appendix, and so I'm wondering to what extent this might also be a function of an increase in VMTs or VMT.
Yeah, so the rates are basically looking at numbers, but they are kind of uniformized by the VMT. So if the VMT increases, the denominator would basically increase. And I think Sam Taylor might have a better explanation for this.
Sure, Len. Yeah. Just to add to what Priyanka is saying, yeah, the denominator is vehicle miles traveled, which are rising back towards pre-pandemic levels, but also, that decrease accounts for us, now that since these are measured as rolling 5-year averages, now that we have like 2020 and 2021, which were particularly bad years for rates,
Right.
kind of out of that 5-year window. That's why you're seeing, a drop off that looks, sharper than it has been.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Yeah, I did notice that drop off. But like I said, I couldn't get a handle on the VMT, so I couldn't find that number anywhere. So it's okay. Because I would have done the math myself. But you did the math, but I just would have had a sense of whether or not VMTs were compensating for that decrease or factoring in for that decrease more than the drop in the number of injuries. And you mentioned the lingering effects of the pandemic. But can we be a little more specific about what those effects are? And if that's not appropriate for this meeting, then maybe that could be part of a follow-up, because I would like to understand a little bit more about what goes into the calculation of these numbers, like how MassDOT kind of determines what those rates are going to be, if they're just trend-based or if there is some analysis of the causal factors behind any given year's number of fatalities and injuries, and then factoring in those causal factors as to help give us some indication of what we can honestly project or target for the future rates.
So my understanding of this is MassDOT basically, the targets are more like projections based off of previous trends, and then MassDOT uses a certain number. So for example, say a 45% decrease or a I'm sorry, I might be misspeaking that, but there's a certain percentage of decrease that MassDOT projects for subsequent years, which is why the targets get more reduced every year, because with the assumption that trends are going to go down, and that percent decrease of projection is also going to reduce in subsequent years. And Sam might also have something to add to this. Please feel free, Sam.
Sam?
So we're talking about the justification for these targets and how these are calculated.
Well, no. Well, we can talk about maybe future presentations or I was just trying to understand whether and I got an answer just now that it's mostly trend based as opposed to analysis of the causal factors. But I'm just going to press this a little bit more. With respect to lingering effects of the pandemic. Do we have any specificity into those lingering effects, or is that just kind of, well, a thing, that happened during the pandemic? We don't quite know why, and as we get further and further away from the pandemic, we attribute less and less, causal factors to the lingering effects.
Yeah, I think more the latter, and
Okay.
also just I'll add that the Boston region's numbers have mostly been following the state's trends, which have also been following national trends. So they're all kind of right in line over the next few years.
All right, thank you.
So, Lynn, just to put a finer point on this, one of the effects of the pandemic was that fewer people were driving, and therefore the people who were driving faster. And what we all know is that speed is a very big contributor to not just the cause of accidents, but the severity of accidents. And so during the pandemic, it wasn't just in Massachusetts, everywhere. You saw both the rate, because less people were driving, they were driving faster, but also the number of accidents and the severity of the accidents went up.
And I appreciate that, because that does give us some indication as to what it was that was causing the increase. And so to the extent that that's a cause, then that can be a target for what we try to reduce as we try to reduce fatalities but maybe that's in a certain kind of such situation that may not apply in other situations. So that's all. So I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to support this course.
Thanks, Lynn. Eric Barassa?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the roadway safety performance targets as presented today.
Thank you. Lynn Diggins.
Happy to second it. Diggins.
Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Certainly. David Moeller,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Tyler Terrassi,
Tyler Terrassi, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swillikowski, yes.
Carl Alexander,
Carl Alexander, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Hoey, yes.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
Glenn Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Chris Diorio,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
All right, Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Priyanka. Next item on the agenda is the Vision Zero Action Plan update. Ali Clayman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone. My name is Ali Clayman, and I manage the Vision Zero work for the MPO. Next slide. And you can go to the next slide. So in my presentation, to build on the safety targets discussion and the fatal and serious injury data that you just heard about from Priyanka, I'm going to give some regional level crash data highlights, focusing more on how we're doing as we start 2026. We'll talk about our plans to track progress and Vision Zero implementation through the action plan and approaches we can take to measure and report on performance at the regional level. We'll review the overall schedule, focusing in on some of the main things happening in the next few months, and I'll highlight the work we're starting to do with municipalities and partner organizations as we start implementing the plan. Next slide. Since you just heard about some of the data and how it relates to the targets we're supporting for MassDOT, I want to start by looking at more of the regional data and think about how we did in 2025 compared to recent years and what we can learn from 2025 and what we're seeing already in 2026. Next slide. So this chart is all fatalities and serious injuries on our roads in the Boston region. This is person level data shown year by year. So that's why some of the numbers aren't exactly the same as what you saw in the last presentation. And what this data tells us right now is that just looking at 2024 compared to 2025, there appears to be an 8.5% decrease in serious injuries and a 23% drop in fatalities. For serious injuries, 2025 looks to be the lowest year in recent years since 2020. And for fatalities, 2025 is quite a bit lower than 2024, but still hovering around that 100 person per year number. Next slide. And this chart focuses in on the data for vulnerable road users, so people on bicycles, pedestrians, and people using other mobility devices. And we see a similar trend where there seem to be decreases in both vulnerable road user fatalities and serious injuries in 2025 compared to 2024. So overall, we're seeing some movement in the right direction, but there's still work to be done. Next slide. Just looking at the 2025 data, we can get a sense of where some of those key areas for improvement are. So looking at vulnerable road users involved in fatal and serious injury crashes in 2025, the crash data shows that 70% were killed or seriously injured when a vehicle was traveling straight ahead. So this points to some of what we were just talking about, the critical role that we know of speed management and high speeds being a problem. Crashes aren't just happening at turns at intersections. Additionally, the data shows that over 40% of fatal and serious injury crashes involving a vulnerable road user happened when a person was in a marked crosswalk, with the vast majority of those happening at an intersection and a smaller amount at mid-block crosswalks. So there's more to dig into here in terms of lighting, pavement markings, other safety factors at crosswalks, but one of the major takeaways is that we're still seeing a large proportion of serious vulnerable road user crashes happening where people should be safe. And then finally, 25% of vulnerable road users that were killed or seriously injured in crashes in 2025 were 65 years and older. So we need to continue our focus on older adults and roadway users in our work in 2026. Next slide. So even though we're seeing reductions in some of the regional data on serious crashes, we've already had multiple fatal and serious injury crashes since January 1st. And I wanted to acknowledge the community members that we've lost so far. There have been 4 fatalities in the Boston region: John Axelrod in Boston, a resident in Lynn, a woman in Marblehead, and Noriko Rapley in Norwood. We've also had serious injuries, including to a teenager in Brookline, and serious crashes, like a recent rollover crash in Cambridge. These crashes give our work urgency. I know some of you at the local level are involved on the front lines of responding to tragedies like these in your cities and towns. And at the regional level, these crashes point to the importance of 2 key parts of our Vision Zero implementation. The first is that in a safe systems approach, we need to think about how the system can be redesigned, including through things like policy change and new vehicle technologies. We need to move away from blaming human error and towards safe systems. Each of these crashes show some of the systemic failures that we want to work with municipalities to design out over time. And the second is related to data and closing data gaps. 2 of these crashes, John Axelrod's and Noriko Rapley's, point to some of the gaps in our main data source, the MassDOT impact crash data, which doesn't capture fatal crashes that are potentially intentional, in the case of John Axelrod, or that happen in a parking lot, in the case of Noriko Rapley. So this is why we've been working with the Department of Public Health to get hospital data on motor vehicle crashes to integrate into our analysis. Ultimately, these crashes reinforce how critical the systemic approach of Vision Zero is, and they can serve as a roadmap for what we focus on going forward. Next slide. So now that we've looked at some of the regional data and what's happened in 2026 so far, I want to transition to building a bit onto Priyanka's presentation about performance measures and remind everyone how we're tracking progress through the Vision Zero action plan. Next slide. In addition to supporting MassDOT safety targets through our regional work, the Vision Zero plan and regional data analysis will allow us going forward to track progress towards our eventual goal of zero fatalities and serious injuries in the region. On an annual basis, the Vision Zero action plan holds the MPO accountable to report on fatalities and serious injuries, both at the crash and person level, the rate of fatalities and serious injuries, and fatalities and serious injuries specifically with vulnerable road users. As part of Vision Zero implementation, we can also consider setting specific regional interim targets to get to zero and specific packages of strategies that would allow us to reach those targets. This is something we're working on this fiscal year and can come back to this board to have further discussions about. Next slide. One of the actions in the plan is for MPO staff to report annually on metrics and plan implementation. And some of the other things we can include in those reports are the number of crashes of different types or resulting from different causes, like speeding or large vehicles, changes in how crashes or high injury corridors overlap with our community of concern or environmental justice areas, progress on MPO actions in the plan, measures of MPO investments on safety projects, and significant safety accomplishments at the municipal level. Next slide. So that's where we are with regional data and performance and being able to start measuring that more. I want to talk about the final action plan and the plan for endorsing that at the March 5th meeting. Next slide. So this is the overall schedule that we've looked at before. I'm just focusing in on the next few months. In late February, we'll be posting the final Vision Zero action plan and asking for your endorsement of that at the March 5th meeting. And then in March and April, we'll be doing on-site safety assessments as part of our project conceptual design work with municipalities and walk audit academies in partnership with Walk Massachusetts. Both of these are opportunities for board involvement, so we'll make sure you know the specific dates of those. Next slide. So related to the board's review and vote to endorse the final action plan at the March 5th meeting, there is a Vision Zero resolution that is posted on the meeting calendar. This is a commitment that we'd ask the board to sign when you vote to endorse the final action plan. And the resolution formalizes our regional goal to eliminate traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries by 2050. And it outlines a pledge that the MPO will prioritize safety over vehicle speed, implement the safe system approach throughout our work, and focus on equity-centered and data-driven decision-making as we work towards the Vision Zero goal. So please review the draft resolution and reach out to me with any comments or questions before our next meeting in February. Next slide. So building off the final action plan, I want to talk through some of the new project and strategy work we're doing over the next 6 months. Next slide. Overall, we're piloting our work this year with 9 municipalities, 5 on conceptual project design, 2 in partnership with the Safe Roads Alliance on distracted driving education, and 2 in partnership with Walk Massachusetts on walk audit academies. And we're using these pilots to test implementation strategies. We're focused on learning from them and understanding how to scale things regionally. Next slide. And next slide. So these are the 5 municipalities that we're partnering with on conceptual design work. We used the regional high injury network to select locations, starting with the top 100 highest scoring corridors. And we prioritize local jurisdiction without current TIP projects to try and ensure that our technical support adds the most value. Next slide. So we've selected all 5 municipalities and locations, and they represent a good mix of context from downtown, a more downtown Main Street area in Marlborough, to a more complex transit-heavy intersection in Newton, and a group of high crash and high risk intersections in Hingham. Next slide. This is the project scope and schedule that we're working on with tool design over the next 6 months. We're going to be doing 3 main things: engagement with municipal staff and stakeholders, in-depth safety assessments. So similar to walk audits or road safety audits, we'll be doing an on-the-ground assessment of the selected location. And then project and strategy development to address the issues identified at the specific location. We'll be working with municipal staff and stakeholders to develop a list of projects and strategies, as well as conceptual designs and cost estimates for up to 2 quick build projects and 1 longer term project. And then another element we're factoring into this is the next Safe Streets and Roads for All notice of funding opportunity, which is anticipated to be released in March with a deadline for applications in June. So by having conceptual designs and cost estimates, these municipalities would be positioned to apply for those federal funds. Next slide. And the final reports that come out of this work will take a systemic approach. The specific toolbox that we develop for the corridors or intersections will include lower cost interventions that municipalities can apply to similar high risk spots across the municipality. Next slide. And then to advance our work on Vision Zero education and capacity building, this is where we're partnering with Walk Massachusetts and the Safe Roads Alliance. Next slide. So with Walk Mass, we're going to be hosting 2 walk audit academies in the spring. These are geared towards capacity building for municipal staff and local advocates. We're still working out exact locations, but doing initial outreach to Randolph, which is one of the municipalities that has a regional corridor in the top 100 list, and Holliston, which could be a location where we could focus in around a school. Next slide. And then we're working with the Safe Roads Alliance to bring their elementary school distracted driving curriculum to 2 municipalities. And part of the work would be having the kids develop messaging, either something like a bumper sticker or a yard sign or recorded messages that could be made into a PSA, and then also presenting what we did with the students and their messaging to municipal leadership and staff. So we're also still working out the specific partnerships here, but we have interest from municipal staff and school officials in Braintree and Melrose. Next slide. So that is all of the updates that I had for the board today. I'm open to answering any questions or having discussion on any of these topics. And just a reminder to please take a minute to look at the Vision Zero resolution and get back to me with any thoughts or questions before the next February meeting, so we can bring that to you on March 5th as part of the final action plan endorsement.
Thank you, Ally. Any questions for Ally? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the federal fiscal year 2027 PL funding and 2027 to 2031 TIP funding update. Olivia Secocia and Ethan Lapointe.
Thank you. We can, yes, perfect. Thank you. My name is Olivia Secocia. I manage our Unified Planning Work Program, and I'm here to briefly update the board about the funding information that was announced last week by MassDOT at the annual meeting of the Massachusetts Association of Regional Planning Agencies, also referred to as MARPA. Next slide, please. One more slide, please. Thank you. So I'll be sharing some information about the federal fiscal year 2027 metropolitan planning funds that will be allocated to the Boston region, and we also refer to these as PL funds. These funds are administered to MPOs for various planning activities, and these activities are outlined in our yearly Unified Planning Work Program. So this chart on the screen shows the amount of PL funds that have been allocated to our region from FFY 2024 to 27. So at the bottom in bold, for the 2027 federal fiscal year, the region will be receiving $7,777,892 in PL funds. One thing to note about these numbers is that they reflect the total amount of PL funds that our region will be receiving, which includes both the allotments for the Boston Region MPO and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council for both agencies to conduct transportation planning activities. The amount of funding we are receiving for next year is fairly expected. Our typical year-over-year increase for next year has been similar to what we typically see over the past few years. For FFY 2025, that number is a bit abnormal. We received a little bit more funding than we typically do. But this is overall to say that the number for next year that we're expecting to receive is pretty consistent with what we've been seeing in the past. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Ethan.
Thank you, Olivia. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ethan Lapointe. I'm a senior transportation planner on MPO staff. If we can go on to the next slide, I'll now start on covering some of the funding update for the Transportation Improvement Program. And before we get into that, I'll remind board members as to where we are in this year's TIP development process. Specifically, given this is the first week of February, we have a couple major milestones approaching right before when we get really stuck in TIP development. Specifically, at the next MPO meeting, there will be an update on specific project changes around project readiness and delivery dates that will build upon the information that's being initially presented at this meeting. We can go on to the next slide. I'll begin to talk about a little bit what I mean. So this meeting is about the sources of funding that the MPO may utilize to allocate towards regional priority projects. Those projects are the uses of funding. Every federal fiscal year, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts receives an apportionment of federal formula funds, and MassDOT receives an apportionment from the Federal Highway Administration for various surface transportation, specifically roadway projects. Around 1/3 of this funding, it's about 34%, is sub-allocated to each of the 13 transportation planning regions for projects. And of that 1/3 being sub-allocated, MassDOT, in consultation with the Massachusetts Association of Regional Planning Agencies, MARPA, then allocates this funding to each of those 13 regions. This is based on a formula that takes into account the overall population or relative population of each region, relative employment, and also relative percentage of road and lane mileage within the Commonwealth as well. All in all, as a result of this formula, about 43% of that sub-allocated funding goes to the Boston region for funding regional priority projects. And generally in late January, MPO staff learned from the annual MARPA meeting presentation what amount of funding is going to be available for programming in each of the 5 years of the federal fiscal years 2027 to 31 TIP, in the case of this year's TIP development process. If we can go on to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how this is a rolling plan when we discuss development of the TIP. The figures that are shown on screen here, which I won't go into detail on, are actually the figures that were provided for development of the federal fiscal years 2026 to 30 TIP back in January 2025. But because the TIP is a rolling plan, some of these figures and therefore expectations are at times carried forward into how staff may do preliminary preparations for developing the next TIP. So in this case, we're showing what the figures for federal fiscal years 2027 through 2030 looked like this time last year. All in all, staff expected around $788 million to be available in this year's TIP programming cycle, again, based on what we already knew. If we go on to the next slide, what we learned in January at the MARPA meeting was that, again, this is mostly consistent in terms of what we're actually expecting to have available over these next 5 years of funding. So instead of $788 million being available, we're looking more at a reduced figure of $781 million of availability. All in all, overall availability for regional target funding varies from about $153 million to $159 million in each federal fiscal year. This is compared to this time last year, where we were thinking it was more like about $152 to $160 million between each of the federal fiscal years. What I do want to talk about, though, on the next slide is actually some major differences between some of these years. Like I said, that $788 million was based on expectations we had, based on information we had this time last year. That 788 was under the assumption that the fiscal 2031 figure we were going to see this January would be sort of level funded off of federal fiscal year 2030. But we're actually seeing is that approximately $7 million decrease overall, but it's really being driven in 2 different years. The first year, or kind of going a little bit out of chronological order here, the first year that I'll talk about is federal fiscal year 2030. That is seeing a decrease from a projected $160.04 million to $155.74 million. That's a $4.3 million decrease. This is the result of the return of debt service payments on grant anticipatory notes happening earlier than was previously expected in that year. So again, that decrease is being driven by additional debt service on the next generation, or anticipated debt service on the next generation bridge program and other projects there. That debt service is sort of taken out of the equation before funding gets sub-allocated to each of the MPOs in the Commonwealth. Federal fiscal year 2028 also has a similar decrease, but for a different reason. I mentioned earlier that there is about 34% of all of that FHWA formula funding that gets sub-allocated. There was a mathematical error last year in which the calculation was actually 34.8% of funding being sub-allocated. So instead, because that mathematical error last year was providing a higher than expected or an incorrect allocation of funding for that 100 for the overall amount of funding available in federal fiscal year 28, we saw an estimate of $158.7 million. That has since been corrected to the standard 34%. That reduces it down to 155.4. So just to kind of summarize, we're seeing a $7 million decrease overall. About $4.3 million of that is due to the return of GANs in federal fiscal year 2030. About $3.3 million of that is correcting a mathematical error in one federal fiscal year that happened in last year's TIP development cycle. We can go on to the next slide. I'll again reiterate that this is meant to be sort of the first presentation to precede the next MPO meeting, which will be talking more about project readiness. When we're developing a program of projects for the TIP, it's really about managing and accomplishing fiscal constraint in each of the 5 program years. When we refer to fiscal constraint, that means that each use of funding our projects may not exceed our sources of funding, the overall amount of funding available for programming. And a TIP must be fiscally constrained in each of the 5 years, meaning that if there's a $50 million deficit in one year, but $50 million surpluses in the other 4, even though that may have a net $200 million surplus, that's still not fiscally constrained. If we go on to the next slide, what we want to talk about here, which we'll expand upon at both the next MPO board meeting, what we've already sort of indicated in the earlier January 22nd TIP committee meeting, is that these expected funding levels largely line up with where expectations fall for the application of the MPO's recently adopted readiness guidelines. With that said, once we apply them, we see that in the earlier years of the TIP, specifically federal fiscal years 2027 to 2029, there's a substantial surplus of funding in each of those years. About $53.7 million of surplus in fiscal 27, $79.35 million in fiscal 28, and $20.23 million in fiscal 29. Comparatively, in fiscal 2030 and 31, we have very little funding available as many projects were projected to be delayed into those federal fiscal years out of those earlier years. Only about 2.3 million in 2030 and 11.1 million in 2031. I'll also reiterate something here. This is solely based off of project readiness. This does not yet factor in project cost increases. We'll have more information on that on February 19th. But if we go on to the next slide specifically, what we will be bringing to that February 19th meeting is a more complete readiness scenario. We've talked about the sources of funding. We've talked about the overall projection of what the balance in each federal fiscal year is. But in terms of actually explaining what is causing those balances and why they look that way, that will be the content of the next presentation and meeting there. I'll also note that those figures, while we are currently showing fiscal constraint across all 5 years based on what I just showed, are very likely to change and indicate a deficit in at least federal fiscal year 2030, specifically because the readiness scenario is only going to incorporate cost increases that are consistent with the 2021 TIP project cost policies. Specifically, we're going to incorporate project cost increases associated with adjustments to program year. So if a project is delayed back by 3 years at a project adjustment rate of 4% per year, we'll see a 12% adjustment. That'll be factored in. If we see a project whose cost increases less than $2.5 million, that will be factored in. And if a project has a budget right now of less than $10 million and it increases by less than 25%, that will also be factored in. This is all rooted in the existing policies the MPO has, the 2021 TIP project cost policies there. We will, however, be noting any projects that have increases beyond that threshold for separate consideration. As Jen mentioned earlier in their chair's report on the TIP committee, many of the cost increases we are seeing among projects this year are concentrated in only a few specific projects, but to a great extent for those projects. So again, as I said earlier, while what we showed here today shows fiscal constraint, the next meeting will be presenting a scenario that is going to exceed constraint in federal fiscal year, likely 2030, potentially 2031. We'll have more information there. With that, on the next slide, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Olivia or Ethan? Seeing none, thank you both very much. Next item on the agenda is a disparate impact and disproportionate burden analysis for the FY 26 to 30 TIP. Betsy Harvey Hertzfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to discuss today the results of our disparate impact and disproportionate burden analysis that show whether the likely impacts of the projects funded in the last 2 TIPs have mitigated those impacts found among minority and low-income populations in the 2023 LRTP Destination 2050. And based on the results of the analysis, we'll also talk about how they can be used by the MPO to improve transportation outcomes for these populations in future TIPs. Next slide. So as part of the MPO's equity work, we want to understand how project investments would affect minority and low-income populations. How could projects in the TIP and LRTP affect them? How can we use that information to select projects that improve transportation outcomes for them? One of the tools that we have for answering these questions is our disparate impact and disproportionate burden, or DIDB, analysis. With the development of each LRTP, we ask, would the projects as a group disproportionately affect minority or low-income populations compared to non-minority and non-low-income populations? And then in the subsequent TIPs that follow the LRTP, we then analyze the projects that are funded in the TIP to see whether they would mitigate those disparities that we identified in the LRTP, and thereby hopefully improving the transportation outcomes for minority and low-income populations. Next slide. So how does the MPO identify and mitigate those disparities? This timeline really illustrates that process. So in the 2023 LRTP, we determined whether LRTP project impacts would disparately affect minority or low-income populations. For each tip that follows, we're doing an analysis to see if the MPO-funded projects in the aggregate would provide benefits that outweigh those disparities from the LRTP. So we're on year 2 now. We've finished years 1 and 2 and are developing now year 3, the 2027 tip. The idea is to share the interim results after each tip with the board before we do a final analysis of the impacts of projects funded across all 4 tips after year 4 to see if they would provide the benefits to the minority and low-income population, if that would outweigh the LRTP disparities. So this is one of those interim presentations. Now, just bear in mind that the LRTP projects are a bit different, of course, from the projects that are funded in the TIP. In LRTP, we analyze large-scale projects, major infrastructure projects. And in the LRT TIP, of course, we're funding both those large-scale infrastructure projects, but as well as smaller-scale projects each year. And so we are mitigating the impacts of major infrastructure projects with a different type and different set of projects. So as I mentioned, we just wrapped up the 2nd year of the TIP. And today I'll share the impacts of the last 2 TIPs on minority and low-income populations and show the progress that we're making toward mitigating those disparities that we identified in the LRTP. Next slide. First, briefly, I'm going to just review which disparate impacts and disproportionate burdens we found in Destination 2050, and then we'll go into the results of the TIP analyses. Next slide. So in Destination 2050, 2023 LRTP, we looked at a series of metrics across destination access, travel times, and pollution emissions for both the minority and low-income populations. These metrics included access to jobs, healthcare, parks, and essential places by both driving and transit trips. We also looked at transit and driving travel times, congested vehicle miles traveled, and emissions for carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and volatile organic compounds. These metrics we developed several years ago, 2017 approximately, through a robust public engagement process and a working group that consisted of several MPO board members. Several of you I know who are still here today, as well as representatives from community groups. So those were kind of the foundation of why we picked those metrics at the time. Next slide. So when we analyzed all of those metrics, part of the LRTP, we found 6 instances where the minority or low-income population would be disparately impacted by the projects the MPO had on the LRTP. Those are access to jobs by transit for the low-income population, access to healthcare by transit for both minority and low-income populations, access to parks by driving for the low-income population, travel time by driving for the minority population, and travel time by transit for the minority population. So those are the 6 metrics that I'm going to be reporting on the results for as we're analyzing them now through the TIP. Next slide. So I'm going to move on now to the analysis of those 6 metrics over the past 2 TIPs. This first set of charts you'll see in just a moment will show how access to destinations and travel times could change because of the MPO projects funded in the last 2 TIPs. Next slide. So here we see the estimated change in the number of jobs and parks that could be reached by low-income and non-low-income populations due to the projects that are funded in the last 2 TIPs. Note that all the charts in this presentation are the average change per 1,000 people, just for ease of kind of reading and communicating the results. So you might notice that they're slightly different from the numbers in the memo, but that's only because they are per 1,000 people, whereas the memo results are per person. Also, just a reminder that these are the sum of the impacts for both TIPs. Again, the memo describes the impact for each, the impact of the projects in each of the last 2 TIPs, 2025 and 2026 TIPs. I should note that it's it says 2026 and 2027 tips. That is a typo. It should be 2025 and 2026 tips. So I apologize for the confusion. We haven't obviously done any analysis yet for 2027 tip because that's what we're working on. So the charts. The green bars on the charts are an increase in access. So that's a direction when we're talking about destination access that we want to see. And the red direction, the red bars indicates a decrease in access. And that's, of course, we don't want to see that. For access to jobs, we estimate that the low-income population could access over 1.6 million more jobs per 1,000 people, while the non-low-income population could access about 900,000 more jobs. So that change is going in the right direction. For access to parks, I should note that these are the number, not the number of parks, but the number of park entrances, because that's where people kind of where they need to reach to access the park. So that's why the number is so high. People are not actually losing access to 17,000 parks. But unfortunately, here we do see that the access is going in the wrong direction, being potentially decreasing for both the low income and non-low income populations. Next slide. So these are the estimated change in the number of healthcare facilities that folks could reach per 1,000 people in our region. Again, green bars represent an increase in access. For access to healthcare facilities, we estimate that the minority population could access about 42 more healthcare facilities per 1,000 people, while the non-minority population could access about 13 more. So again, change going in the right direction. For the low-income population, we estimate they could access about 46 more healthcare facilities, while the non-low-income population could access about 15 more. So yeah, change going in the right direction. Next slide. So these are our final two disparate impact metrics. This is now travel time. So travel time by transit and travel time by driving per change per 1,000 people. These are for all trip purposes. So regardless of the reason people are driving or taking the train. Here, the green bars represent a decrease in travel time, and that's the direction we want to see. Red is an increase in travel time. For transit trips, we estimate that travel times for the minority population could decrease by about 900 minutes per 1,000 people, while for the non-minority population, they could decrease by about 1,100 minutes. So both going in the right direction, different magnitude for both, though. For drive trips, we estimate that travel times for the low-income population could increase by about 9 minutes per 1,000 people, while it could decrease for the non-minority population by about 56 minutes. So change is going in the right direction, or is not going in the right direction for the low-income population, potentially increasing in travel times compared to the non-minority population. Next slide. So these next set of slides will show us whether the outcomes that we just saw, the changes in access and travel times, whether that is sufficient thus far for the last two tips to mitigate the LRTP disparities for minority and low-income populations. Just recall that we are looking at whether tip projects mitigated disparities from the projects in the tip. Do the benefits of the tip projects outweigh the negative impacts from the LRTP projects? So we're not saying that one impact is better than the other, but the relative difference between two population groups. Next slide. So I'm going to orient you toward the charts a little bit. They're a little different from the ones we just saw. The top bar shows the number of destinations or travel time minutes that have been mitigated. In other words, how many destinations could the low-income population access over and above the non-low-income population, for example. A green bar means it has been mitigated, red means it hasn't, while the gray bar below shows the overall mitigation need, and that's the mitigation need that we identified from the LRTP projects. So if the top bar is going in the right direction and exceeds the gray bar, mitigation to date, the last two tips has been achieved. So for access and jobs by transit, in the LRTP, we found that we would need to mitigate about 143,000 jobs so that the low-income population would have equal access to the non-low-income population. And so what we're looking for is for the projects in the TIP to provide the low-income population with at least 143,000 more jobs than the non-low-income population. And we can see that across the last two TIPs, that is likely to happen as we anticipate the low-income population to get access to about 741,000 more jobs than the non-low-income population. So that's good. However, for access to parks, the low-income population is expected to get access to fewer parks than the non-low-income population. So thus far, mitigation need of has not been met. It's less than the Great Bar. 796 park access points. Next slide. So here we see the healthcare metrics again, access to healthcare by transit for minority and low-income populations. The minority population is expected to get access to 29 more healthcare facilities per 1,000 people than the non-minority population, which exceeds the mitigation need of one healthcare facility. So that means that mitigation is on track. For the low-income population, they're expected to get access to about 31 more healthcare facilities than the non-low-income population, which exceeds the mitigation need of 8 healthcare facilities. So mitigation is also on track for that metric. Next slide. So finally, we have travel times. We want to see, as a reminder, a decrease in travel time. So green would show that it's moving in the right direction, while red indicates that travel time is not moving in the right direction, that it's increasing. For travel time by transit for the minority population, mitigation has not yet been achieved, even though we expect an overall decrease in travel time, which we saw in the earlier chart. The non-minority population is expected to get a bigger decrease in travel time, that's a comparison we want to make. And so we expect the non-minority population would reduce their travel time by about 155 minutes more than the decrease in travel time for the minority population. So it would not be mitigated at this point. Similarly, for travel time by driving, mitigation for the minority population hasn't yet been achieved. As you saw in the previous slide, the minority population would expect an increase in travel times and the non-minority population a decrease, which means that mitigation hasn't been achieved for the minority population. We would be looking for a decrease of at least 14 minutes more than the non-minority population, but instead we expect that the non-minority population will get a bigger decrease in travel time by about 65 minutes over what the minority population would get. Next slide. So I just want to summarize. It's a lot of information, so I just want to make sure to summarize kind of where we're at over the past 2 tips in terms of mitigating those 6 disparate impact metrics. 3 metrics: access to jobs by transit for the low-income population, access to healthcare by transit for the low-income population, and access to healthcare by transit for the minority population have been mitigated so far over the last 2 tips. So that's good. Everything's going in the right direction. The 3 other metrics, however, have not made progress toward mitigation. Access to parks by driving for the low-income population, travel time by transit for the minority population, and travel time by driving for the minority population. Next slide. So to wrap up, before we get to a discussion, questions and answers, I just want to kind of discuss what this might mean for the next 2 tips. Staff, as we've been doing these past 2 years, will continue to conduct further analyses for each of the 2027 and 2028 tips and share those results with you. One thing you might be wondering is whether there are projects the MPO could fund that could improve access or reduce travel times. Well, we hope that some of the project scores will provide insight into some of the benefits each project is expected to provide. We do continue to work on refining these criteria so that it's easier to determine which population groups may get better access or reduce travel times. However, it's important to remember that this analysis looks at just one slice of the kinds of benefits that projects can provide. Not all projects will provide improved access or improved travel times. For example, if a project focuses on safety or, say, climate resilience, they may not address travel time or access at all, and it's possible that improvements could slow travel time in some cases. It doesn't mean that those projects can't or couldn't or shouldn't be funded. Rather, the results of this DIDB analysis should be one of the several things that the board considers during discussions of project scenarios later this winter and each year as you try to balance mitigation of disparate impacts with other transportation needs in the region and project readiness. So with that, go to the next slide. I'm happy to take any questions and have any discussion.
Thank you, Betsy. Questions for Betsy? General.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this really thorough presentation, Betsy. I wanted to ask if staff through the Vision Zero body of work are taking a look also at the possibility of developing safety metrics that could also be used in these type of analysis. And I sort of asked this, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit in the one of the last slides, where there can sometimes be a tension between projects that perhaps have traffic calming and could, in this analysis, show add to travel time or restrict destination access by driving, for example, but also provide important safety benefits to those same communities. And I would want, kind of to the sense that we, what you measure is what you value. Like I would want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in how we're making some of these decisions and when we have to decide projects in the LRTP.
That's a really good question. So these sets of metrics are kind of set for this, the four tips that follow the 2023 LRTP. But as we go into the next LRTP, we are starting to consider updating some of our LRTP disparate impact metrics, or if they might also just be generally outside of disparate impact and just good things to track. So that, while safety hasn't been part of the collection of metrics in the past, it's definitely something we want to continue to consider because we definitely acknowledge that and want to make sure that we're kind of capturing the full range of different types of benefits and understand who's being impacted the most by the projects that we're investing in.
Thanks, Betsy. Lynn? Yeah.
No problem. So thank you. I'm glad we got to this in time. We say the best for last, but sometimes we get to these so late, that I'm hard pressed to engage you a bit. So I have a few questions. First off, I just want to say though, I think it's a feature, that we have the LRTP project, which are huge generally, that can potentially cause some disparities, and that we then try to mitigate those with smaller projects through the tip. So it's a feature as far as I'm concerned, because it's just the nature of the population distribution and other things. So just a series of questions that going to be kind of overall all over the place. I like to try to kind of confirm results of almost anything. So given the data on the decrease in travel, transit travel time, would you see a benefit to doing a UPWP study, where we try to confirm that, for like MBTA travel time?
Can you be more specific, like just in terms of what project, how different projects affect transit travel time, or?
Well, I'm going to come to that later on, but no, let's just say that we had a UPWP study that looked at the travel time, for minorities, non-minorities, or low income, non-low income. I know we kind of try to do that. When we do the fare increase analysis, but when it comes to travel time, would you see any benefit to us trying to do a study, where we would get assess the travel times, for the various populations?
Yeah, I think certainly we want to understand as much as possible kind of what the different factors are that go into changes in travel time and kind of looking at who's being impacted. That is part of this obviously is fairly high level, but I think I do. Any continued exploration as to understanding kind of
Yeah,
what the
but
trends
also
are in depth. And yeah.
Yeah, but also just try to maybe do it over periods of time to try to see, whether we are noticing a difference, in the travel times, for the various populations, and just it'd be another data point, it might be because I know this is pretty much a model, and it's doing the best it can, but it'd be good to see if there's some confirmation or at least correlation, from some other data source. But I was just trying to get a sense as to whether you would see any value in that, or you just see it as, well, maybe a waste resources, or it wouldn't test what I'm thinking it's testing. It's just an idea that I put out there for now. So this study reminds me, or this presentation reminds me that I needed to go back and do some work based on your initial presentation back last year. So I just want to confirm the appendix that came with that one, about the methodology. Is that still what was used for this one? Or any changes to what was done in that appendix versus what you did now this time?
The appendices are very similar. I kind of try to keep things the same. And just to your point about like tracking things over time, we are trying to track like changes and what we expect to see in changes in travel time for each population, which is why we kind of group each tip together. But yes, these are modeled. These are through a tool called Conveil. They're not actual travel times. And I think that's what you're getting at is like actual travel times that people are experiencing versus like modeled travel times.
Right. To see to what extent the model, is kind of reflecting reality, because this is all theoretical, and I think it's good that we do this because it's good to get a good sense of what is the theoretical impact of what we're doing, but if that theory isn't grounded, in reality, then it's a different kind of exercise, so I would say to the extent that we can try to ground it, that would be good, but so I could go on, but I'll do some exploration myself, and I also noted that you talked about bike rack access being wasn't included because it doesn't improve access, or no, maybe you didn't say that. Maybe you said it wasn't included, and I guess my question was, what doesn't improve access? But as I read your document, it seems like that's not included, along with the non-inclusion of transit signal priority, floating bus stops, and bus queue jump lanes, because we're just not certain of their impact, but not that they don't have an impact. So do you see some point at which we feel certain enough that we can include them? Because especially with TSP, it's just such a big part of what we try to do as municipalities, because we think it's going to help. It'd be really good if we could, model those and get some sense as to whether it's going to help. So any projections of when we might be able to add those?
That is a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Because yes, there are some projects that we don't include because we either, like you said, that basically can't be modeled as a change in the transportation network in Conveil. And we are currently working on improving the sorts of things that changes that we can model in Conveil, and certainly, especially around transit and making sure that we're modeling that, things like TSP or bus queue jump lanes correctly. It's definitely still work kind of in progress and in that way, and we'll continue to make sure we're using the best estimates and using Conveil to the best of its ability to model as much as we possibly can. But it is important to remember that not every TIP project is going to be part of this destination access and travel time analysis.
Yeah, well, great work. I remember us funding, some, at the beginning of the investigation into this tool, through DPWP. So it's good to see it being used. Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Betsy. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any? Jan Rowe.
Mr. Chair. Just wanted to provide an update that the Rutherford Avenue project is very active in stakeholder engagement at the moment. We've begun some meetings with agency partners and local community groups and adjacent municipalities, and there's many more of those to come, including we'd like to engage with many of the members of this board. We've scheduled a series of community meetings, the first of which is this coming Wednesday at February 11th, 6 p.m. at the Warren Prescott School. I'm going to put a link to the flyer in the chat. And because this is such a large and complex project, we're also scheduling 2 additional meetings in mid-March and mid-April before submitting the 25% design in late May. Going forward, we'll work with the chair, the vice chair, and MPO staff to try to find the best way to communicate key updates, because we know that the upcoming agendas are rather packed. But we do welcome everyone to attend the community meetings coming up. So thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Other member items? So I have one. Unfortunately, for some reason, John Bouchard couldn't be here today, but I just want to let everybody on the MPO know that John is retiring. His last day at MassDOT is actually a week from tomorrow. So I hope John would be able to be here today and we could have all wished him goodwill on his retirement. But feel free to reach out and send him your best wishes if you want. John's been great for MassDOT. He's been great for the MPO. We're sorry to lose him, but wish him all the best in his next endeavors. So if you'd like to reach out to John, please feel free. Any other member items? Brad Rawson.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Chair. I wanted to raise my hand and offer that as a member's item to celebrate John's service and contributions, and any members or partners who want to get past his typical humility and understand the impact that he's made over his service. Check out last week's Mass DOT Board of Directors meeting. It was a really nice citation the Secretary and the Undersecretary gave to John B. And while you're watching that footage, note that there's also some really important and helpful discussion the Mass DOT staff have provided that will inform our work together in coming months on the TIP process. So again, thank you, John, for all your service, and then let's all make sure to continue to thank him. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Brett. Any other member items at this time? Seeing none, can we get a motion and a second to adjourn? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Great meeting today. Thanks, everybody.
Lynn Diggins.
I'll second that motion and second Eric's assessment.
Thank you. Any objections? Without objection, we are adjourned. Great job, staff. It was very interesting today, as always. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.